this week, the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister and the Foreign Affairs Minister appeared before a Commons committee, and they were asked questions about Chinese interference in the 2019 campaign. Now, the concern does follow a global news report. It was published last month. And while an intelligence briefing did warn of an active foreign interference campaign, Dominic LeBlanc said an assessment found no negative effect on the results nor on the outcomes of the vote. For her part, the Foreign Affairs Minister seemed to equate any interference to online disinformation. And earlier this week, I did speak to Melanie Joly about the issue. Listen, I want to begin here with your appearance before our Commons Committee this week, because the committee members, they really wanted to know about these reports of Chinese meddling in the 2019 election. I'm wondering what you might be able to share with people who are watching this interview right now about that incident or incidences of interference.
Well, I answered the committee yesterday, as mentioned by the Prime Minister, as mentioned by the NSIA, Jody Thomas, as mentioned also by my colleague Dominic LeBlanc. We have no information regarding such interference, foreign interference in the 2019 elections. Of course, we take this issue extremely seriously because obviously it's in our own public interest, our own shared interest to address this issue, but we don't have any information to that regard.
So you don't know, for example, whether or not it's just limited to the 2019 vote or whether or not it's just limited to those dozen or so ridings and candidates?
Well, you know, we have no information to that regard. What I can tell you, though, is before the 2019 elections, we had concerns regarding foreign interference, particularly in light of what had happened in other democracies. And when I think about foreign interference, I particularly think about disinformation online, and which is affecting all democracies. And we know already that China and Russia is undergoing proactive disinformation online campaigns to destabilize many democracies, including ours. And so that's why we put into place an important process, which is headed by nonpartisan experts. And they also said that in 2019 there was no foreign interference. And so that is why the story that came out regarding this 2019 possible foreign interference is important, but at the same time, we need to have evidence. And right now, I don't have that evidence. The Prime Minister doesn't have that evidence. Our public service and national security agencies, including CSIS, don't have that intelligence. So that's the information I can provide you today.
Mm-hmm. So I do wonder then, because you did meet with your Chinese counterparts on the sidelines, but you did meet with them when you were in Bali for the G20. So what did you say to them regarding interference? If you did not have specifics, what were you actually talking to them about?
Well, definitely disinformation online, because we know that there is proactive disinformation happening. And I said in general that foreign interference is not tolerable in Canada. We just won't accept it. And so it was not a conversation. I looked at him in the eye, and that's what I told him. So this is what we do in diplomacy. We actually give tough messages sometimes, and sometimes we are much more in collaboration mode. But when it comes to foreign interference, this is about the strength and the viability of our own democracy. So basically our position is the same with every single country, period.
Now, as we talk about China, you know, of course, you did unveil a new Indo-Pacific strategy at the end of November. You described China during that announcement as a disruptive global power. And that really is a huge shift, because back in 2017, your government described China as an important partner. So is your strategy now an acknowledgement that China is no longer a friend?
Well, clearly, China has interests that depart from our interests. And China works every day more and more to either violate international norms, or I would say also bend international norms in their favor. There are two schools of thoughts which are in opposition right now. The one that is the one that basically President Putin is abiding by, which is essentially international norms do not and should not be, how can I say, followed, because he believes that being a nuclear power and having a sphere of influence is more important. And at the same time, There's us and our allies and actually many countries around the world which are about really protecting international norms. Canada has been an architect of developing these international norms following the Second World War. These norms have kept us safe since that time, and we need to make sure that we work obviously with our friends, obviously with our allies, but also with many other countries which have in common with Canada the protection of the UN Charter and also the protection of the basic principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, which are at the core of the world's stability.
So if we are diverging in philosophies, then what does that mean for something like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank? As you know, Conservatives have been raising that issue for years now. They basically say at this point that Liberals are talking the talk, not walking the walk. What does it mean for the future of Canada's involvement with that bank? Is it done? Is it going to wrap up?
Well, what we've done, we've addressed this issue in the Indo-Pacific strategy, and I know the Minister of Finance also is on this. But what I can tell you, though, is that in the Indo-Pacific strategy, what we decided to do is to invest even more in bilateral support and bilateral infrastructure support. So we decided to put $750 million into an infrastructure fund through FinDev, and that will be helpful for countries across the region that are in need of infrastructure, particularly infrastructure that deal with the impacts of climate change. I'm thinking of the Philippines, I'm thinking about Vietnam, about India, and definitely also about Indonesia and Singapore. So these are just countries that we will engage with regarding this very issue.
But will you divest yourself of the investment bank, though? Again, that's a 1% share, to my understanding, that Canada has, but it is a bank in league with China. Will we divest ourselves out of that bank?
Well, what we said regarding that bank also is, since many countries, including European counterparts, are part of it, we want to make sure that all our investments are well taken care of and at the same time follow the basic guidelines of international norms. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we increase our influence in the region, and that's why we're investing even more money through FinDev and that infrastructure fund.